Okay, so what are we talking about today? I put up this list. I guess the other thing I should mention is that as a kind of political statement from the teaching and learning side, I try to maintain a set of commitments which cover the whole spectrum of post-secondary education. So I normally have a project at the TAFE level, a project with an ATN type institution, a project with a comprehensive state university, and something with a research university. That's my way of saying to people, there's good teaching going on everywhere and we can all learn from each other. Fortunately, there's also not so good teaching going on everywhere. So, the examples here will come from one particular sector, but we have other universities involved. And I was mentioning to John, part of my fellowship at UQ is to work with the team there on graduate qualities, especially on the game-changing graduate, which is their signature institutional strength, and everyone's now trying to figure out what the vice chancellor means by that. You may have experienced something like that. Okay, so let me give you in 4 lines what it talks about, and that'll be your first exit point. If that's not what you came for, then by all means, take off. The premise here is that in addition to what we're doing now with discipline outcomes, and what we're doing with kind of standard graduate qualities, communication skills, teamwork, critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, and so on. Our plates are already full with that, and now we're saying we need to do more. Because we need to prepare our students to work with knowledge that doesn't yet exist, using knowledge practices that don't yet exist, in jobs that don't yet exist. So my best illustration of that is my wife asks me about once a month to explain my son's business card to her, because he is the director of global talent analytics for a major financial institution. Now that whole job of talent analytics didn't exist more than maybe 6 years ago was the first time that shows up. He reports to the senior vice president of possibilities within that bank. Did that exist 5 or 6 years ago? Does that sound like the bank where you bank? So that's the environment in which our students will have to be able to excel. And what can we do in higher ed to prepare them from that degree of uncertainty? Our premise, so these are all, the first is a statement and the rest are hypotheses. Our premise is that we need to prepare them not just with those discipline outcomes and the standard horizontal competencies or soft skills or generic capabilities or even label them. We also have to be involving them in emerging learning and knowledge practices. So let's give them a chance while they're here with us to work with some of that stuff that's just emerging. Because if everything we give them here is prepackaged and it's already in the textbook, then how does that prepare them for jobs that don't yet exist, with practices that don't yet exist, and knowledge that doesn't yet exist? So that's the premise. Now, that's the student-centered side, which we want to have primary, but also from an institutional differentiation perspective. If you're looking at a teaching and learning strategy in which the University of Sydney can be globally exemplary, then something of that sort is probably your best bet. From a strategy point of view, tackling people on what everybody else is already doing doesn't actually make a lot of sense. So there are aspects already in your graduate qualities of that sort. Game-changing graduate at Queensland is their effort to move in that direction. So if we're going to do that, this is the bit that we've added to the argument. We think that we have to consider our teaching and learning environment as a workplace. Some of you may be familiar with Stephen Billick's work at Griffith, where 15 years ago or so he started making the point that a workplace can also be a learning place. And I communicated to him that we're flipping that around. We're saying that our teaching and learning environment can be treated as a workplace. So that what students get on their resume is, I have worked on an innovation project and left a legacy within our organization. I've been a change maker within our organization, within our own workplace. Now, we think that the same capability extends beyond the workplace to graduates' other roles as community members and global citizens. But money from the government is in workplace innovation. I'm sure that's as true for you as it is for us in Canada and the US. So we always add at the end in parentheses and in their other roles as members of global citizens. But if you talk to a politician and say we're going to create smarter voters, well, that's not always a turn on. That's not always what they want to have. So, workplace, yes. So I'm going to illustrate all of this with one particular capability. We've got a list of about 8 of these, including epistemic fluency, which I learned from Peter and Lena. But this will illustrate these premises, okay? So that's the why, the what, the how, and the really? Are you doing this? How crazy can you be? And there's a kind of discussion break here after kind of halfway through to say, where would this fit within the University of Sydney? I'm kind of primed John already to make the first comment. Okay, so we're talking about innovation, but we have a different definition than most ways it's used in higher ed or in workplace. Treating innovation as the social process of creating lasting value from new ideas. Now, you can imagine 30 academics from all over the university getting together and coming up with a 9-word definition of anything. You can see that that in itself is an achievement of sorts. But we wanted all these elements. We're talking about the social process, not creating the idea. That's one step in the process. But getting something that has lasting value, that is, it gets implemented at scale. From, I want to say risky new ideas, but I didn't win that one. So, from the workplace point of view, there are 3 types of innovation capability that relate to this definition. The one that we do now in higher ed, we typically have a lot of programs to develop innovation leaders. Right, so I'm sure these are taken from one of the campuses where I work, UC San Diego. That was the closest analogy from my workload at the University of Sydney, so 30th on the Times Higher Ed list, et cetera, et cetera. So typically, a lot of us have programs for entrepreneurs. That's been a popular topic. It's been easy to raise money for. We typically have things for social innovation. So we got boot camps and accelerators and so on. But that's really for innovation leaders. In a broad access public institution, it's unlikely that more than a single-digit percentage of our students are really going to be successful entrepreneurs. Now, you can do better at that Stanford or some other campuses that are able to target more. So if we're talking about a graduate quality, then it's hard to see entrepreneurship as something that we could ever expect every student to achieve while they're with us. So we think that all of our students need to graduate innovation capable. They need to have the capability to engage effectively with innovation in the workplace. That could include innovations that are thrust upon them from above. Here's a new work practice that has worked at our lab in Geneva, and we want to see if we can make it work here in Brisbane. We know there'll be some adaptations there, but you're not inventing the process, you're adapting it, right? Then there might be something that you're involved in where management or someone else identifies, here is a problem, and we need a team to gather from across the organization and work on that. Or it might be the case that you, as an employee, have actually identified the need, worked as an intrapreneur, I'm sure you've heard that term. So all of these are different ways in which our students are going to be expected to interact with innovation. So here's an example. This is an example from Australia, but not well known, because every time I show this in Australia, people say they've never seen it before. This is from the training ministry back in 2009, when this was put in as a requirement for technician and technology jobs. So if you look at the accreditation process to become an environmental technician, it says in there you're going to have the capability to contribute to workplace innovation. And that includes a list of skills like these. You should be able to identify opportunities to do things better in your workplace. You should be able to discuss that and develop it with others, so it's not just you're the lone wolf doing it all on your own. You should be able to anticipate that some people aren't going to like this, and how do we mitigate the risks and share the benefits in ways that bring people on board. This is the European version of it, so there's a good deal of work. In fact, the term workplace innovation comes from the European research, and I'll show you in a moment some of those sources. But what the Europeans have added is this notion of not just improving organizational performance through workplace innovation, but improving the quality of working life for the people doing the work. So it's seen as a partnership. Your engagement in workplace innovation isn't just to better the bottom line. It's also to help you and your colleagues in the workplace find a more satisfying, rewarding, fulfilling engagement there. So I kind of like that aspect added to the North American emphasis, which tends to be bottom line, who can be fastest to the initial public offering of a unicorn company. So we think all our students need to graduate with at least that level of innovation capability for the workplace and in their other roles, as I mentioned. Or someone put it to me as being a critical friend of innovation. As I was sharing with John, we have one of the projects I'm working on in Canada around critical thinking as a graduate quality, but we're labeling it constructively critical thinking. Because students were having the problem, well, I know what critical thinking is. That's what the instructor does when I submit the assignment. It's the right to criticize and rip it to shreds. Well, actually, that's not what an employer wants from you, that you can be critical and pick things apart. Pick things apart in order to put them back together in a better way. So constructively critical, friend of innovation, is another way we could deal with that. Now, I showed you that list of skills from the training department, but we think in higher ed we need to do more than that. It's not just skills for students. We need to have some contextual knowledge underlying those skills. We need to be able to know which skills do I need to bring to bear in this context. So it's not just having skills, but knowing which ones and when and where and why and how they fit into the context of the problem. We were originally calling this conceptual knowledge, and we tried that on our workplace partners. Conceptual knowledge sounded too academic. So saying big picture knowledge, contextual knowledge, ability to pick out which skills to use, that makes a little more sense. Skills and knowledge don't do much good unless you have some experiential learning opportunities to put them to use and develop a capability. We're going to do that in our own workplace of the teaching and learning environment. Okay? That's the premise, that we will be able to engage students in the kind of innovation that they'll face in the workplace while they're here as undergraduates. And then, so skills, knowledge, experiences, and mindsets. So all the other pieces won't do us much good unless students have a commitment to actually make it happen. Right? If you've ever taught a statistics course, you know that feeling. At the end of the course, students may have the skills and knowledge, but if they leave saying, God, I hope I never have to do that again, we have not fulfilled our responsibility as instructors. Okay, so skilled, knowledgeable, experienced, and committed would be another way to put that. This is the infographic that we're using. We have a one-page version of this that goes to government ministers. So it's targeted to a short attention span, but it's all on one page. And this is what it says. Skills, the big picture knowledge, the experiential learning, governments like to hear about that, but they're not quite ready for work-integrated learning that doesn't take you off campus. The idea that this could be a workplace, and that what you do here could be seen by you, the student, as engaging in legitimate and valuable work. So, stopping at this point to say, where does this fit? Does this ring a bell for you? Does this tie into graduate qualities like inventiveness? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, as I'd like to hear. This is from the contextualization here in social work and education. I always have to explain this because folks in the room, even if they're from the faculty, may not be able to recite this stuff by heart. I just grabbed it off the webpage. So if you think you haven't seen it before, then you're not alone with this. I'm dying for someone to explain unlearning to me. I've spent the last 5 days here walking around the CBD, seeing all the things that I should be unlearning. I'm sure there's something else I'm supposed to learn instead. So, we're going to do this as a kind of think, pair, share. So, find somebody else to have a quick conversation with. Say, where do you think this might fit as a capability? So, this is just one illustration. Again, we've got a longer list of these emerging learning and knowledge practices, but let's focus on this one for the time being. Find someone to chat with about it and say, well, what do you think? Is there any place here where this fits? Can we adapt some of these ideas, maybe the idea around using our own teaching and learning environment as a workplace? I'll show you that next, but let's see first of all where it might fit. So 5 minutes to talk to somebody, and then we're going to go around the table and kind of share some thoughts. Okay, so let me do a bit on the how. Okay, we've done a why, we've done a sort of what that capability might look like, and understand that this is a classic example of building the plane and flying it at the same time. We'll be teaching something in the 2018 academic year. It's kind of a ready or not situation. So one of the things that we've done is map out a set of scenarios. Most of the courses that we're looking at are 4 years long. So we have 8 academic terms to work with the students. So we've literally mapped out a series of scenarios. How could we provide experiential learning opportunities around innovation capability for a student in, say, their second term? Okay. So I'll just give you one of those examples, but we have one for each term. And if folks want to stay around later, I can show you more of this. So here's an example I can relate to as an instructor. So if, as an instructor, I was an instructor in software engineering, I frequently introduced the terrible topic of group work, and even braved on some occasions to talk about peer review of group work. And if you came into the class and said, we're going to try something new this semester, we're going to be working in groups, and we're going to be doing peer reviews of each other's work, and blah, 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 there would always be a set of people in the back row who, by their body language, communicated very clearly, I'm not buying this. Yeah, I just figured out the rules and you're going to change them. I don't see any benefit for me in this, and probably somewhere hidden away is a way for you to do less work as my teacher. So you can feel that vibe in the room. So what if we capture that? Has anybody ever had that experience introducing an innovation in a course and not had complete enthusiasm as a response from the student? Okay. So how do we make that a teachable moment? How do we say in that class, 5 years from now, you're going to be at the front of a room like this, talking to a workplace team and saying, we're going to be looking at a new way of doing agile scrums or something in software development, or we're going to be trying a new work practice here. And you're going to have a set of people, probably in the back row, communicating to you, we're not buying this, come on. So kind of freeze frame that thinking that you just had. It's a perfectly rational response. But I want you to freeze that in your mind. Later on in the course, we'll have opportunities to reflect on that and say, well, was it as bad as I thought? Or in some cases, was it as good as I thought? Because there's some students in the class who say, oh, good, we've unlearned the way of doing it. We've unlearned the way of doing it before, and now we're going to try something new. Isn't that great? Because new is always better. No. So we want to capture those moments with the students, give them opportunities to reflect on it later, and to provide feedback to us. How could I have introduced that in a way that didn't seem as risky to you? How could I have shown how I'm going to buffer you from the risk, mitigate those risks so that you don't suffer while we figure this out, knowing that it's not perfect yet? How could I have explained to you what stage of the innovation process this was in? Do we have a huge body of research that says this can work, and I just have to adapt that to our setting? Does everybody else in the department do this, but it's new to me? Or is this something brand new that, I woke up in the middle of the night and thought, oh, let's try that class tomorrow? Hopefully not, but can we share with the students the degree of risk and the degree of maturity of the practice that we're introducing? And give them an opportunity to reflect on that. What do they get out of that reflection? They get movement on the digital badge for innovation capability. So, if we're asking you to do some extra work, it's on the basis that it can provide credit in some other way outside of my course in chemical engineering or macroeconomics or whatever it is. So that's where the graduate qualities mechanism comes in. If you want to move forward in achievement on the rubric on this graduate quality, there's an opportunity here in this class to do that. I'm already marking the assignments. It's not a lot more work for me to incorporate this and in so doing contribute to university graduate quality achievement. There's a colleague of mine in the US where they have 5 or 6 badges for the graduate qualities, separate from the coursework, because these are things that happen over the whole progress of your time as an undergraduate. It's not one instructor's responsibility to teach you everything you'll ever need to know about teamwork, right? So this kind of runs a 90-degree angle to the standard discipline outcomes. And what they've done, what my friend has done in the US, they've asked every instructor to find one assignment that they're already marking in one course that would help students to move forward on one of the graduate qualities. So that, that was felt to the administration as if we're asking the absolute minimum. We'd like every faculty member to try to identify one thing you're already doing, not changing your course, in one of your courses, and on one of these graduate qualities. And then we advertise that when students sign up for particular sections of a module or a subject. In the registration system it says, oh, by the way, in Professor Smith's version of this subject that's offered Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you can also earn credit on the digital badge for innovation capability. So it's voluntary on the part of the faculty member, but they have 2/3 of their faculty now doing this, at least one, on a voluntary basis. Students are registering for those sections based on which badge do I want to achieve. And then for the first time last spring, they instituted 2 graduation ceremonies on the same day. So if you're in, let's say, a built environment, on the morning you go to the graduation ceremony where you're honored for your rubric achievement. If you've reached mastery level on the rubric on any of the graduate qualities, you're invited to that ceremony, you're acknowledged and recognized, and you're actually given a cord. It's a blue cord for leadership and a green cord for cultural competency. Then in the afternoon, you go to the normal graduation ceremony for built environment or accounting or whatever, and you wear your cord, right? So that the university is really trying to communicate, this is important, it's across all of our programs, and so we have to find new mechanisms. We actually have to be a little bit innovative in terms of how we encourage, support, recognize, and reward those achievements. Yeah?
One of the conversations we're having in my school is about whether we highlight to students in this unit, you're all going to learn this particular graduate quality, and whether giving them the heads up for that distorts perhaps their output. So we're looking for things like, we want innovation, let us come up with anything. You go, oh, I get a big A because I've been innovative.
Yeah.
And I think there is some literature, particularly in the medical health profession, that says that students are very good at being tactical.
Yep.
And so therefore, if we're giving them that sort of incentive or letting them know that it's happening, that's perhaps skew. It may not actually inform their intrinsic attributes.
Right. So, Elaine, in the scheme that I mentioned, it's entirely separate from the course grade. Right, so your grading scheme in the standard discipline outcomes and requirements to graduate in the subject are kept separate from the graduate qualities. That's the premise. I mean, our graduate qualities we expect are things that will help you in your learning anyway, but the fact that you choose to work on the digital badge credit as a student is intended to not in any way affect the normal grading of the assignment.
Do the normal markers who would be marking their assignment for content mark their GQ mastery?
That's up to the instructor. Okay, so it's the member of academic staff has made the decision that in this offering of this course, I'm going to have that opportunity for you. So then it's kept at the instructor's discretion as to how you manage that.
And how do they share a common idea about what counts as valid criteria for assessing that quality?
So I mentioned that 2/3 of the academic staff who joined in this particular experiment have gone to some faculty development sessions, have sat around a table with people from other programs and seen sample work. So in our program, we would have marked this at the mastery level in the rubric. We would have marked this at the developmental level of the rubric. So in their case, the university rubrics, the kind of labels on the steps in the rubric are institutional. And then, of course, the contextualization of what that means in our program is local. But that's one of the ways that they try to get some kind of calibration. Maybe we're being particularly hard on our students in journalism, and there's another department that's being a little soft on it.
Yeah.
But it's up to us then within the department to figure out what we do with that information. So it's very much keeping the control with the academic staff and the ownership with the academic staff. Yeah.
Do they like that?
Yeah. Really? Go ahead.
And so it's very intriguing. How do you, if there's a separateness, how is it embedded into the curriculum? Like, is there that move then to, just trying to get my thoughts clear, being part of
Yeah.
this, that if it is that we're trying to get graduate qualities out there, this seems to be, that they're working on a parallel path with their
Yeah.
learning to
That's
get
right.
there. So is there then a disconnect between the curriculum and that path?
Well, again, that's up to the academic staff to resolve that, right? To say these are whole of program outcomes, and we've done a reductionist thing and broken down the program, at least in the discipline content, in terms of you're going to learn this in your algebra class, and then you use it in the next class, and so on. So we've constructed a discipline structure that has these sequence of prerequisite courses and so on. And now we're trying to fit into it this notion of whole program outcomes. Now there are some examples of, like nursing is a good example. I worked with a nursing school in British Columbia. And nursing is a good example because the professional society that licenses you as a nurse says in its requirements, here's how you must be able to learn. As an entry-level professional nurse, you must be able to learn in the following ways. So they have looked at, okay, they mostly have traditional age students coming school leavers. So what did they learn in secondary school in terms of learning practice? What does the professional society require them to do as entry-level graduates? How do we get them from point A to point B? Right, we've got 4 years in that program. Is it 25% per year, or what does that mean? So the academic staff, as part of their curriculum development, have had to cope with that graduate outcome being very well specified by their professional society. The rest of us sometimes don't have that kind of target that's set firm. But, so there are examples of programs, the academic staff in a program taking responsibility for that, but it remains this challenge for any outcome that's developed over the course of the program. Students come in from secondary school or from the workplace or wherever they're coming from on quite different places on each of those rubrics. And so we did another example. We were creating learning outcomes for an Amazon field school, which is kind of the ultimate experiential learning thing. There were students from design, from the built environment, from cultural studies, from literature, all coming from different places, and we had to create outcomes. And all of those outcomes were then on these generic qualities, right? All we could say was you come in a certain spot on the rubric, and each student has to move at least one step on 2 rubrics on the graduate qualities. So So there's some examples of that we can talk more about. Can I, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I probably should say something here because I think Adrienne might be a little worried at this point because what this university is attempting to do is to really try and integrate the qualities as much as possible right through down into the learning outcomes themselves and into the assessment events as well. Rather than treat things as running in parallel, really integrate them. So that I guess that's sort of a little bit of a dichotomy in a sense between what you're talking about and what we're trying to do here.
Depends what you mean by integration, John. If you remember that these are being integrated in the sense that this is in a particular subject module, work that you're already doing, and now integrating into that some measure of achievement on the institutional rubric for the graduate quality. We should talk more about how to get more than that to happen.
I mean, these are issues that the university is grappling with as we speak.
Yeah.
It's not a fixed thing by any means. We're working through all these issues ourselves.
Okay. I do have an example there from University in Chicago that does their graduate qualities really well and has a set of customizable roadmaps for students. So I should show you that.
I'd like to see that.
Ruth?
Yeah. Oh, Elisa.
Elisa,
Yeah,
sorry.
if I could comment on that, as I understand it, you would have these units of study or courses,
Yep.
and different sections of that course would be specifically addressing a particular graduate quality in more detail. But I don't think that necessarily that's to the exclusion of other graduate qualities. Is that
That's right.
what we mean? So there would have students would have they would still be gaining experience in some of the other graduate qualities, but they would be getting specific merit points towards one particular graduate quality. Is that right?
That's right.
And would within a particular course there be separate sections addressing separate graduate qualities with different
That
students?
happens to be how that particular university did it. In order to emphasize that they wanted the academic staff to hone the process. So you as an individual decide. Now, at some point, senior administrators are going to look and say, well, how many of the courses in the built environment program have something about leadership? So there is a bit of data that starts to come there about how seriously is your program dealing with this. But take leadership as an example. I mean, we have courses in psychology and management and so on about leadership, right? And that's the contextual knowledge stuff. But it's very hard to run a course in which every student has an opportunity to demonstrate their skills in leadership. Just if we're all leaders, then where are the followers? So saying that there's another opportunity to demonstrate those skills, right? That's kind of the flavor.
And so back to John's point, that wouldn't be it wouldn't be separate necessarily. It wouldn't be separating the graduate qualities from the curriculum. We're addressing them, but we're also doing extra.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the whole curriculum mapping exercise where you're planning in advance as to where these qualities might fall best within specific units of study.
That's right.
And so you do it that way.
Yeah. Billy, quick comment?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it seems that what we're trying to do, we're trying to just like bring the workplace into the classroom. But I think, still my teaching experience is that usually, let's say business English, but while the students are learning in the classroom, they still think, oh, it's going to be marked by the teachers, this and that. They didn't really see the value of it.
Yep.
So I'm just thinking whether actually you can bring the student into the workplace, maybe as practicum or even just as an observer, so they get a sense of like what's really happening.
So on this particular set of scenarios, that came towards the end. And this was us saying we shouldn't send out a student allegedly able to contribute to innovation until they have demonstrated that in our own workplace. So that may or may not prove to be a good way to do it, but we are saying students have work to do, they have performance evaluations, they have goals and deadlines. So there are aspects of this that are a lot like a workplace. don't often see a workplace that's composed mostly of 18 to 22-year-olds. So there's some particularly unique things about us. But if you go to some of the high-tech companies in Silicon Valley, if you go to Google, LinkedIn, or any of those, their workplace looks a lot like a residence hall. It's like, so, yeah, if the workplace analogy doesn't work for you, don't get stuck on it, because it's not a theological commitment on our part. It's just a practical way of explaining it. Let me give you a bit more of the how, and then we'll see what other topics you might want to pursue. So, right at the moment, we're halfway through a knowledge synthesis. So, good academics, we looked at what's been done previously, what's the research evidence, where are the exemplary practices, where are the promising innovations that we might learn from. In particular, around things like innovation skills. This is another document from Australia, which has a bit of a map to say these are the typical stages that you in the workplace might engage with innovation. You might be identifying or interpreting a situation to find the need. You might be taking what someone else had identified and trying to find some solutions on it using design thinking or some methods like that. You'll certainly be collaborating on others to see if that works here. How could we move that around? At some point, you have to sell it to get support for it. If you're the ones who started it as opposed to having it imposed on you by management. So we're gathering information on these different models of the innovation skills package, and on the contextual knowledge side, we're doing something similar. So we've got a huge Dropbox structure with folders for all these things and so on. So here's an example of the contextual knowledge. This is from a Harvard Business Review paper in June. And so 4 different types of innovation. There are dimensions here about how we might break up the space. And then there's a set of skills here that say, if it's this kind of an innovation, probably these kinds of skills would be what would be most likely useful. And now we're at the point of debating not, do we agree with this particular framework? Academics, with a PhD thesis, obviously, every one of those kinds of questions, and we don't want to get into the issue. We're trying to decide how much do students have to know. Because we're saying, if we say this is a graduate quality, we're saying every one of our students could and should achieve this. So we are talking, obviously, to workplace organizations, both corporate, public sector, and not-for-profit, about how much do you want students to know? You probably want them to know that maps like this exist. There are ways of dividing up the space that say, for this context, these skills are the ones that you probably want to look at first. Would we ever give students an exam saying, here's a 4x4 box, fill in 16 skills? No. Right? Because that's going to change over time. That's not what we do. But the fact that different skills fit into different contexts, what are some of the parameters of the context that determine that? This only shows 2 of the parameters. And if I'm in a context and trying to figure out which skill sets, where would I go to find that information? Most recent version of this diagram, because there'll be a paper in Harvard Business Review next year, the different, either different labels on the boxes or a 3-dimensional diagram or more skills. Okay. So that's about, again, preparing our students for working with knowledge that doesn't yet exist and practices that don't yet exist. We had this discussion earlier about interdisciplinary perspectives, and we're collecting these kinds of things. This is about the ethics of innovation. We have a history faculty member. Anybody here from history? Okay, so in history, there is a thing called reacting to the past, which is a way of engaging students in a role play from the past. So the role play they're looking at is Rage Against the Machine. This is from Barnard College in the US. And that's about the Luddites reacting to the introduction of mechanical looms, and some students play the workers who are going to lose their jobs, and some people play the children who are going to starve, and some people play the manufacturer who's going to reap the benefits, and yet some of them are asked to look at it from the future and say, was the Industrial Revolution something good for humanity generally? Well, yeah. So they're asked to grapple with all these things in order to understand the ethical implications of innovation. So we're working on a course called Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Workplace Innovation, which will be offered in 2018, as I say, kind of ready or not, committed to do this. We've submitted a chapter on it to a new book that's coming out in the US, Redesigning Liberal Arts, Innovative Program Design for 21st Century Undergraduate Education. And there is a conference at the University of Queensland next week on the future of the BA degree in Australia, where I'm also presenting some of this. So here's examples of some of the resources on this particular capability. Employee-driven innovation, workplace innovation, these are both new research summaries. This one's from 2017, this one's from 2012. So there is evidence out there about how do people engage with innovation in the workplace. And there's other evidence. This is a PhD thesis that was turned into a book, but it's a cross-disciplinary primer on the meaning of innovation. It starts with the design of Roman aqueduct arches and kind of moves forward from there, touching on Galileo and Picasso and just a whole bunch of things. You got a whole chapter on evaluating innovation in the creative arts. So there's no shortage of perspectives. We just have to figure out how much of any of this do students have to know. We have a new project that came up over the summer on innovation and indigenous ways of knowing. I know that's a whole effort to indigenize the curriculum and make sure our students understand respect, and value indigenous ways of knowing. Canada's probably 2 or 3 years behind Australia in this being a political priority, but moving quickly on it. So what happened was over the summer in the knowledge synthesis, 7 or 8 papers like this showed up. The 2 books and several papers showed up, all within the last 2 years. So in the last couple of years, suddenly there's a body of research evidence about innovation and indigenous ways of knowing. You can't see the titles. This is about indigenous innovation, universalities and particularities is the subtitle. And this one, I'm really eager to get into indigenous innovations in higher ed. Didn't know there was a book about that. So that's a new project, and again, it may fit somewhere here. Okay, sorry. So we're trying to have a set of diverse and inclusive roles for faculty. So as outlined, some faculty might participate by engaging students when they themselves, as faculty and staff members, are introducing innovations in teaching and learning. So you could be a part of this endeavor without thinking of yourself as teaching innovation. Just creating an opportunity for you to reflect on an innovation according to the rubric, and there's some resources to help with that. There will be people, like in the SARTS 2100 course I mentioned, teaching for that contextual knowledge. There will be others, as Carey was mentioning earlier, who will provide opportunities for students to contribute to the redesign of the course. And then we think we can go one step further, that if they've done that, let's say in 3rd year, then in 4th year, again thinking of a 4-year program, they could help us to introduce a change into 1st year studies, where students are particularly vulnerable and might need a little more close care. So we could have students doing that as a way of earning their badge on the rubric for being a coach and catalyst for innovation. So this is the thing I mentioned earlier. We have tried to move away from students as partners in teaching and learning. That's the standard terminology that's used. Kelly Matthews at Queensland has a teaching and learning fellowship on that, trying to coordinate things. Students as partners in teaching and learning has 2 disadvantages. When a student puts that on their resume, I was a member of the Students as Partners in Teaching and Learning team, that looks really academic. Right? It's hard for an employer outside of education to look at that and say, oh, I want somebody who's done that. The other thing is that as acronyms go, SPITL is SPITL, and I find that probably not one. In Scotland, they call it SPARKS, Students as Partners in Quality Scotland. We prefer students as partners in knowledge, learning, and innovation, which is Sparkland. So we have Sparkland students who put on their resume, we participated in students as partners in knowledge, learning, and innovation. Well, which employer would say, no, we don't want that? Right. So we're having a little fun with how we package this up, but we have Sparkland students. I mentioned that if we stay on schedule, we'll be meeting with both small and medium-sized enterprises and one convening and large organizations and other convenings. If we're going to promote this as a digital badges only make sense if, when you put it on your LinkedIn page, it has meaning to people who are doing job searches. Yes, and in their other roles as community members and global citizens. You add my parentheses there, but that's when a digital badge starts to make sense. So we have to have some employer involvement in this. But again, those are private sector, but also public sector and non-profit. And there are opportunities, obviously, opportunities galore for research and scholarship. So within a particular discipline, so our history professor intends to publish something in a journal of history on how historical thinking could help students be better at innovation and how we could make that happen for them. Okay, the most important point of all, I saved for last. This only works if our faculty are actually doing some innovations in teaching and learning, right? You can't actually be promoting something like this and sticking to the old methods. So I'm sure somewhere in Unlearn, there's Unlearn how we have taught in the past, or at least parts of it, so that we can be more productive, but also more ambitious in terms of what students do. This is my favorite meta teacher, Parker Palmer from the US. In the book, The Courage to Teach, he has this great line that good teaching can't be reduced to just technique. It comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. How we teach is a key part of what we teach. That's true for any of the graduate qualities. If our faculty can't communicate well, the message to students is, maybe it's not quite so important. If our faculty aren't innovating in the classroom, then none of that scheme that I showed you of getting students involved in innovation can find roots. So if we're going to create opportunities for them to hone their skills by working with us, we have to be innovative. So and that's true of any of those emerging learning and knowledge practices. So it's true of innovation. So open invitation if folks are interested in that particular capability. We'd be glad to talk to you about how we can partner on it. In a nutshell, we're looking for innovation-enabled graduates. They're enabled for innovation in the workplace and their other roles as members of global citizens. And that only works if they're enabled by innovation in our teaching and learning. So if it wasn't scary before, I hope it is now. That's what we're looking for. But if we're going to take that seriously as a graduate quality, we have to get to this. Okay, a lot of this is shown up in blog posts. So Inside Higher Ed is a daily online briefing for academic leaders in the US, and I have 3 blog posts in there. I can show you how to find them easily enough. In Canada, there's a similar one called Academic Forum, and a couple posts in there. One other thing, let me show you very quickly. There we go. So we will shortly have a website. This was soft launched internally within our team last week. So there's a lot of stubs there for now, but it's wincan.ca, Workplace Innovation Capability for Canada.ca. So there's lots of stubs there at the moment, but many of the blog posts that I mentioned are accessible from here. This is the one about the book chapter we just submitted on that went into that book I mentioned in the US. It's about that interdisciplinary course. And the graphic for it is, suitably enough, building the plane while flying it at the same time. So that will gradually fill up with content, but don't be surprised if there's any number of stubs there at the moment.